Hello, hello, hello. All right. Going to be doing some tarot readings and looking at the current astrology. Which we do more of, or how much we do of each, will be completely up to those who end up joining in. Of course, it's quite late right now, so I don't know if people are really awake or not, but I guess we'll find out. If not, then I'll be looking at the astrology the entire time. Let's see here. Get everything set up. All right, let's see how I sound. Okay, good. So I'm not entirely sure how people will feel about my asking for $10 for tarot readings now, but it is what it is. I am broadcasting on a dark and somewhat stormy night. You can hear the rain outside. I guess there's storms sort of off in the distance. So who knows, maybe we'll get some lightning and thunder as we stream. I've got my green tea as usual. And we're just going to kind of chill out and look at the astrology, unless or until anyone shows up wanting a tarot reading or an astrology reading for that matter as well. Let me get that stuff ready here. Maybe I should just do like ASMR astrology streams or something. I try to read the current astrology, but in like a whispery ASMR voice. I wonder what people would think of that. I'm joking, obviously, but it's kind of a funny thought when you think about it. And currently the moon is in Aquarius. Just imagine that. Let's see, what was the other thing I wanted to do? Here we go. Of course, sometimes I do, actually often enough, I do talk in a rather, not a whispery tone, but like, I don't know, a quiet tone. Because it feels strangely appropriate. Also, with it being late here, 1:48 a.m., I'm a little bit tired, so hopefully this goes well. But regardless, I'm here with the astrological data and also with my tarot cards, should anyone show up wanting a reading. And let's dive into this stuff. Okay, so a lot of this I mentioned recently in my current astrology stream, but there have been some new developments and there's some things we just didn't talk about. We didn't cover in that stream, so let's begin going over it all now. So the sun is at the very end of Gemini right now, of course, at 2839 of Gemini at this time. Soon it will move into Cancer. Cancer season will begin. So our sort of conscious mind focus, or the general overt focus of the energy, will move from that curious, intellectual, playful Geminian vibe to the deep, emotional, more serious, self-protective, cautious Cancerian vibe as Cancer season officially begins, as it does all the time at this time of year. Now, of course, as I mentioned on my recent astrology stream, Mercury and Mars have already been in Cancer for quite some time. number of weeks. I don't think I have that date in front of me, but they've been in there for a bit. So in various ways, we're already feeling that deep, emotional, cautious Cancerian vibe with Mercury and Mars. So especially like when it comes to our mind, and also when it comes to that which we fight for and what we're sort of motivated to do and take action on, those being Mercury and Mars respectively. So we're going to get an added boost of that in just a couple of days, actually, to be precise. On June 21st at 11:53 a.m. Eastern Time. And that's precisely when the sun will move into Cancer and the energy will shift at that time. So literally what is officially tomorrow, because it is after midnight here as I am broadcasting this. So in addition to that, of course, speaking of Mercury and Mars, we just had a Mercury-Mars conjunction a day and a half ago, June 18th, 12:06 p.m. Eastern Time, making our thoughts and communications very aggressive, very assertive, very much perhaps challenging boundaries and making the potential for arguments and conflicts higher, especially with their opposition to Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn. So if people have had a rough couple of days or a rough number of days ever since about June 14th, there's good astrological reason for that. That's exactly what I would expect, basically. So I think it's also interesting to consider the energy of Mars being about pushing forward, pushing into the new. And when it's combining with Mercury, again, that's our thoughts and communications. And so it's like many of us right now, and just recently have been, I would say, pushing through into new territory mentally, and or when it comes to communication and things of this nature, but still with an element of caution, because remember, this Mercury-Mars conjunction is taking place, or did take place, in the sign of Cancer. So Mars in Cancer is much more cautious and not quite as impulsive, but it's still Mars. Mars still does what Mars does. Thunder literally sounds as I said that. The gods agree, apparently. So let's see. Oh God, sorry that my hair just looks so terrible tonight. I don't know. I need to fix it. I'm going to be doing that soon. Let's see. What else do we have? So we talked about the Mercury-Mars conjunction in Cancer. And what's kind of interesting about this, and hopefully we can get into more of this later, is that Mercury is about to enter the point where it will retrograde back to, once it goes retrograde soon, which is this 23 of Cancer. I guess actually it's already there. Let me just see if I can sort of haphazardly figure this out here real quick. Let's see, I think it's like on July 31st, August 1st. Yep, there we go. Goes direct. Yes, it goes direct again, either on July 31st or August 1st. Maybe I can narrow that down later, but I'm just trying to get the degree at 23 degrees of Cancer. So we're entering a period of time right now where basically, even though Mercury is not retrograde yet, and it goes retrograde in about 2 weeks, it may start to feel like Mercury is retrograde. We may get some of those sensations, some sort of previews of that energy as Mercury moves into the zone into that area that's past 23 degrees of Cancer, that it will be traveling back through when it goes retrograde, like from Earth's perspective, for those who are very new to astrology, a retrograde, Mercury goes retrograde. From Earth's perspective, it appears to move backwards in the sky. Obviously, the physical planet itself does not move backwards, nor does it ever change speed. But from Earth's perspective, it appears to move backwards, and it feels like there's that added tension as well here on Earth. Because essentially, if you believe my theory that all reality is psychological, all of the stuff, the planets and whatnot, are simply reflecting what is going on within us. So let's see, what else can we talk about? Yeah, we can probably get into more of the Mercury retrograde later, because that will be getting more and more significant as we move along. Let's see. Wow, that thunder just keeps sounding outside. Not very loud. Probably can't hear it on the stream. I don't know, but it's out there. It is out there. So in addition to that, of course, we just had the Mars-Pluto opposition. So we focused kind of on the Mercury side of the, Mercury conjunct Mars opposite Saturn and Pluto, but let's focus on Mars a bit more for a second here, particularly Mars opposite Pluto. That can make for some rather stressful energy, and I'm going to sum up a description that I have here. Stuff like obsessions, the desire to mate, efforts at personal transformation, thinking strategically, medical procedures, the urge for dominance and territory, these kinds of things. And the reason for that is essentially that Mars, again, is what we fight for, what we take action on, what motivates us, what we are motivated by. It's also willpower, assertion, aggression. Pluto is the power structure. Pluto is powerful. It's the deep, dark unconscious. It's the hell realms. Pluto is everything that is beyond our usual reach. Pluto is everything that is so far out there that it's virtually inaccessible. And both Pluto and Mars are associated with sexual energy as well. And so oppositions, those are points of tension or aspects of tension, and they often play out in relationships. So, in this scenario, one person would likely be Mars, the other would be Pluto. Or even if we take it back to Mercury, one person could be Mercury, the other could be Pluto. Or if you really want to get into the details of this, I guess, I don't really know how to put this, but one person could be the Mercury-Mars conjunction, that aggressive thought and speech, and the other person could be the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which we've talked about that enough, so I'll just leave that at that, I guess. But, this this Mercury aligning with Mars and both of them opposing Saturn and Pluto, yes, it's been stressful as hell for many of us. Fortunately, I got through it with little difficulty, actually. But, I knew it was coming, so I knew to be a bit careful. But the thing is, whether it's been a little bit stressful for you or very stressful for you, it is beginning to dissipate, to fade now. So you can look forward to that. However, of course, with that Mercury retrograde, actually, let me sort of verify this if I can. Yeah, well, in a sense, with that Mercury retrograde, we haven't seen the last of particularly Mercury opposite Pluto, although that aspect will never quite perfect because Mercury won't quite get back far enough to be perfectly opposite Pluto, but it will get very close. So I'm sure that we'll be feeling that around the end of July, especially July 31st, August 1st, July 31st and August 1st. So if there's a lot of Mercury opposite Pluto, the mind versus the unconscious, or that which is very powerful and deep and intense, if there's a lot of that around the end of July and early August, don't be surprised. Let's see, what else can we talk about here? The moon, of course, currently now in Aquarius. Just shifted into Aquarius earlier. It's at 2-1 of Aquarius. So, one moment. So, our mood currently has shifted from that very serious, practical, down-to-earth, calculating Capricorn energy to a much more intellectual, detached, perhaps a bit rebellious, odd, mental Aquarius energy, which is probably some much needed sense of intellectual detachment after the perhaps tumultuous emotional turmoil that perhaps many of us have experienced to some level or another in recent days as a result, or as is reflected by the Mercury Mars conjunction opposite the Saturn Pluto conjunction. And I know I've said this time and time again on these streams recently, but just real quick, because it bears repeating in case anyone didn't see my other streams. With that Saturn Pluto conjunction, short story is that'll perfect completely in January of 2020, January 11th to be precise. 111 is the date, but they're more or less conjunct, just not perfectly conjunct all year. So we're feeling this all year. They got their closest in April. So look at what happened to you in your own personal life in April, this past April, and understand that that was a preview. That was a small sample of what is really to come and what is really going to hit hard in January of 2020. April was a small preview of what is really going to come in full in January of 2020. That's what you need to know. That applies both individually and collectively, if that isn't obvious. All right, so now that I've gotten that out of the way, what else do we have? Venus continues her transit through Gemini, giving us perhaps a love of more intellectual, curious things right now, a love of maybe short distance travel, of trying to sort of be everywhere at once or try all kinds of different things and things of this nature, that Geminian energy. Venus is rather quickly moving into an opposition with Jupiter, which will perfect June 23rd, 12:44 p.m. Eastern time. And so that's essentially, if you break it down very elementary, ourselves that loves, that knows what we like versus what we dislike, that is all about socializing, that is interested in things that are sweet and delicious, and is also interested in money. Venus against the aspect of ourselves that is about beliefs, idealism, philosophy, metaphysics, theology, bigger, better, more, expansion, magnification, beliefs as opposed to facts. And did I mention optimism? If not, optimism. Jupiter, which is transiting its home sign of Sagittarius this year. So, yeah, the part of us that is focused on love and sweetness and deliciousness versus the part of us that's focused on bigger, better, more, optimism, positive thinking, expansion, knowledge, belief systems. So Normally, that's not really that bad because both planets are such relatively easy energy to work with, and in traditional astrology, they were known as the two benefics, the two quote-unquote good planets. There is, however, in an opposition, the risk perhaps of too much of a good thing. That is a theory I've heard quite often from astrologers about this sort of an aspect. Overindulgence, because Jupiter magnifies anything it touches. Jupiter is touching Venus. Venus is about, again, what we find sweet and delicious and stuff that we enjoy. And so thus, therefore, indulgence. And then you have the overindulgence when you add in the magnification of Jupiter. And as with all oppositions, this can also play out through relationships where one person is more or less Venus, the other person is more or less Jupiter. And again, while it can be great fun if you use the energy wisely, if you're not careful, there can be perhaps, that overindulgence or too much of a good thing in some way, shape, or form. And maybe even, the sort of like romanticization of or romanticizing of beliefs and ideals and stuff like that, as opposed to maybe looking at the reality of the situation. There's maybe the risk of getting caught up in the fantasy of things a bit too much, especially with Jupiter currently still being square to Neptune, and then Venus also squaring Neptune when this opposition happens. So normally when we're talking about the danger of getting caught up in illusions and fantasies, we're much more talking Neptune, but Jupiter and Neptune have very interesting connection, very similar energy there. And I don't know, I guess I don't need to go into all that right now. But just know that on June 23rd, there may be, I would say, especially with Neptune literally being involved in this opposition very directly, there may indeed be a risk of getting caught up in fantasy, getting caught up in romanticizing things that we want to be true, things that we want to believe, but maybe are not necessarily reality. Let's just see here. That Venus square Neptune perfects the very next day, 5:58 a.m. Eastern Time on the 24th. So the 23rd and 24th, basically, of June of this month, beware possibly getting caught up in too much fantasy and stuff like that, especially with, as I see here, by June 24th, actually now the day before that, the 23rd, the moon has moved into Pisces, which is the sign that is ruled by that Neptunian energy. And so there could be even more risk of getting caught up in the fantasy of things and not in a good way, sort of to our detriment. So I would say, use that creative energy wisely if you can. Do something creative on June 23rd and or 24th. That would be most advantageous. And it looks like it will be late at night on the 23rd that the moon aligns with Neptune in Pisces, which may be when we see this energy at its strongest, because it'll square Venus also when it's doing that, and Jupiter too, for that matter. Now, expanding on this concept, though, this is an interesting sort of tangled astrological web that I see here, because in the mix with all of this, even though we have the risk of perhaps getting caught up in too much fantasy or whatever, we also have stabilizing Saturn forming a supportive sextile to Neptune. And this is an ongoing aspect, of course. This perfected actually just 2 days ago from now. But hang on just a second. But yes, as this is happening, Saturn is still sextiling Neptune. And that essentially is making the dream real. And so And so I don't want to give people false hope, but this particular, Venus opposite Jupiter, Venus square Neptune sort of situation might not be quite as pure fantasy as we're used to, because Saturn is in the mix, and Saturn is the reality, and Saturn is lending its support to the dream or fantasy that is Neptune currently. As for Venus, Venus forms a quincunx, a frustrating aspect to Saturn at this time. And so Saturn is essentially giving its approval and support to Neptune, the dream, but it's not exactly giving its approval and support to Venus, what we like, what we love, what we find sweet and delicious, our social lives, our money. Now, it's not to say that Saturn can't give some level of reality to that, though. I certainly think it can. Quincunxes should not be underestimated. That's what I've learned in studying astrology. Don't think that there's some minor insignificant aspect. With Venus quincunx to Saturn, it may be frustrating or difficult in some way, but if you sort of navigate that energy wisely, theoretically, you may be able to turn what you like, what you love, what you enjoy, what you find sweet and delicious into a reality around that time. So it's a very complicated situation astrologically. And I think probably one's best bet over that period of a couple of days, like 23rd, 24th mainly, is to really try to separate fact from fiction, try to separate what is doable from what is just pure fantasy, but also realize that on some level, that which is of reality, that which lends its support, how do I put this? On some level, that which lends support to making things real is cooperating with the fantasy elements of things over those couple of days. So don't think that anything that seems too good to be true is, or don't think that anything that's a fantasy is impossible at that time, because that's not actually what the astrology tells us at all. It does tell us, though, to not go past a certain limit. And it's going to be up to us individually, I suppose, to figure out where exactly that limit is. Again, this is specifically around the 23rd and 24th. So I leave that to all of you to figure out. I mean, I can't really tell you that anyway. You kind of have to be the ones to figure that out, because, astrology isn't going to tell you the specifics of how the energy manifests. It simply tells you what the energy is. Actually, let me explain also to people what I mean by that. Let me attempt to explain it anyway. So when I say that astrology tells us what the energy is, but it does not tell us what the form is, I guess that just sounds like it makes no sense to a lot of people. So I'm going to make this very, very clear right here, right now, this energy versus form thing. And I think I'm going to repeat this from time to time in the future, so that hopefully people who watch me, at least, who don't get it, can really get it. So let's say that someone had a very strong predisposition in their birth chart to the planet Neptune. Neptune rules things like film, fantasy, of course, we were just talking about it, film, fantasy, spirituality, all kinds of non-physical things, creativity. So someone who is very much wrapped up in that energy, they may end up in life being a very spiritual person. They may end up being a filmmaker or a director of film, or may act in films. They may be a highly creative person in general. any of those basically. So you can see all of those things. Those are different options, right? Those are different forms that the energy can take, but the underlying energy itself is all Neptune. It's all Neptune energy. So I hope I explained that well. I hope that makes sense. It's like they could end up in film, they could end up in theater, they could end up in virtually any kind of art or creativity, creative endeavor. They could end up being a highly spiritual person. But they will end up in something, whether it's as a career or a hobby or whatever, that is Neptune-like, that is of that Neptunian energy. And so when I'm saying astrology only tells us what the energy is, it does not tell us what form the energy will take. That's what I mean. So let's see what else we have here. Damn, as I suspected, we're 31 minutes in and no one has come in for a tarot reading yet. I don't think anyone's really up currently. Let me just check a couple of things here though real quick. I mean, I'm sure there are people up, but not very many of them. Okay, well, maybe this will just become a pure astrology stream. Who knows? Let's see, moving on. So this is somewhat of a minor aspect, I guess, or a rather transient aspect, but the moon is currently moving into both a sextile with Chiron and a square to Uranus. Interestingly enough, both will happen at almost the same time. Chiron is currently at 5 degrees of Aries, and Uranus is currently at 5 degrees of Taurus. So once the moon reaches 5 degrees of Aquarius, which it will in a number of hours, let me just see if I can sort of pull that up real quick. Yeah, we're looking at roughly 9 a.m.-ish or so later today, June 20th. So yeah, 9 a.m. and then a little bit soon after that for the sextile to Chiron. Once the moon reaches that point, though, essentially harmonious sextile or cooperative sextile to Chiron, the wounded healer, getting us much more focused for at least a number of hours, perhaps even the whole day, on the idea of healing wounds in ourselves, healing wounds in others, healing wounds in others to help heal the wounds within ourselves. That's essentially Chiron in a nutshell. But there will also be then this square to Uranus happening at the same time. So perhaps some unpredictable things happening, either around that, the healing of wounds, or just in general, maybe even some difficult predictable things, because that's like saying, again, a very basic elementary level, the moon, our mood or emotions, in an internal conflict with Uranus, the part of us that is the rebel, the individual, the weird part, the part that is sudden, shocking, unexpected, unpredictable, things of this nature. Uranus is the planet that reconciles irreconcilable opposites. And so while we are focused on this healing of wounds in a much more harmonious way, we at the same time are likely to be struggling with this Uranian energy. So struggling with a sort of internal rebellion, or maybe unexpected things happening, whether they're sort of happening internally or coming up in our so-called external world, things of this nature. So be aware of that. But of course, again, that's very temporary aspect, really not likely to affect us any longer than this day, June 20th. adjust my air conditioner slightly. Let's see, what else do we have here? So we talked about that, talked about the Mercury Mars thing. Well, interestingly enough, the North Node is going on is in an ongoing trine to Neptune. Hey there, I'm Joseph Quinn. Thanks for the donation. We can talk about the North Node trine to Neptune later. What question would you like to ask? Get my cards ready. And of course, to be perfectly honest, that North Node trine to Neptune is a bit difficult to even describe because the North Node is a bit more nebulous, at least for my at least from my studies. Future love, maybe. All right, so a Celtic Cross love reading. All right, excellent. You don't know? Okay. Do you want me to give you some more time to think about it, or do you want to go with future love? Could also just be on a situation. It doesn't even have to be a question. Go for it? Okay. All right, let's do it. Also, I've been doing this recently. I'm going to minimize my screen or minimize the browser window while I do the reading so I can really focus on it. So minimizing now, minimizing the other one. Okay. Well, actually, let me just pull it back up real quick. Okay. So we would like a Celtic Cross reading for Joseph Quinn on the idea of future love. Is there love coming in the near future, in the distant future, for Joseph Quinn, Celtic Cross? Let's see what we get. Okay. What can the universe tell us about future love? For Joseph. All right, there it is. Okay, so let's see. The Hermit, Six of Swords, Ten of Cups reversed, the Knight of Pentacles reversed, Six of Wands reversed, Page of Wands reversed, Seven of Swords reversed, the Chariot, the Magician, and the Eight of Swords. Okay, let's see here. Let me sort of put all this together. Let's see. Well, basically what I'm seeing overall here from these cards is that there may be, well, there may or may not be some kind of new love trying to come in, but there's some kind of a blockage, essentially overall, to that energy. There's something that you likely need to move on from, as we're seeing here, Six of Swords challenge card, something in the past that maybe did not go so well, hurt feelings, disappointment, Ten of Cups reversed energy for the underlying energy. I know some readers will say that card is positive even when it's reversed, but I don't really know if that's accurate from my experience. Because currently, actually, I'm going to draw an 11th card for you just to see what else we have. Okay, Five of Swords reversed, just to get a little more insight. Your final outcome card, being the Eight of Swords, indicates that on your current trajectory, where this is all likely leading to is a situation where you're still constrained by something within. There's still something that you need to release or let go of. You need to, how should I put this? There's something within that you need to move on from, or like some trauma that needs processed, or like a difficult situation that needs processed, so that you can unblock this energy. Now, it is interesting that when I drew an 11th card, you got the Five of Swords reversed, as if to indicate, when this card's reversed anyway, that there may indeed be, over time, some release of that energy, some dissolving of that internal conflict, or whatever it happens to be. Because whenever we see this card reversed, that's generally the idea, is the resolution of things like that, resolution of conflict. But let me see what else we have here. The other thing that kind of is jumping out is there might even be, if you have felt like you've been alone and isolated for too long, there might be a need to almost give yourself a bit of a push into new territory, new circumstances, stuff like that. Maybe get outside of your comfort zone a little bit, because starting off with the Hermit, which, I mean, you don't need to be a tarot reader to know that card can often talk about loneliness and isolation. Again, Six of Swords challenge card, telling you your challenge right now is to move on, move forward. But what we also have for your hope to achieve position is the Six of Wands reversed, indicating that you're wanting right now to overcome a blockage to moving forward and sort of asserting yourself. Six of Wands, wands are fire. Fire is all about assertion and willpower and stuff like that. So, and I mean, you take whatever resonates with you, but that could be another element to this, where if you feel like you haven't been getting outside your comfort zone enough, the cards may be advising you to do that to some level. Even with the Page of Wands reversed in the near future, could be saying, like, in your near future, there may be some potential for the, upright inspiration that this card talks about. But if you don't give yourself a bit of a push, then it's going to remain blocked, essentially. So let's see here. I guess another thing on a more positive note is, for your attitude or position in the situation, Seven of Swords reversed. This can often indicate the idea of like surrender, or of letting things sort of get back to normal. And so the way that I would read this is, I think you likely have an openness to sort of doing whatever has to be done, whether that's, processing stuff internally, or getting outside your comfort zone, pushing yourself a bit, or whatever, particularly when it comes to love. an openness to that, which will be very helpful indeed. So I hope that that was satisfying. A lot to think about. Yeah, there's quite a bit. Do you have any questions on this reading specifically? Anything else that I can help you with regarding this reading? I'm surprised how spot on it was. I thank you. I'm happy to hear that. I always do my best. So thanks so much for getting a reading from me. I appreciate it immensely. All right, so I think now we shall go back to the astrology. All right, let's see. So, of course, we were talking about that North Node Neptune trine that we have, and I'm trying to see when exactly that perfects. Or if it does perfect anytime soon, actually. See, this is the thing about the North Node. Like I said earlier, it's kind of tricky in many ways, or at least for me it is. Well, I'm pretty sure sooner or later it will perfect, but regardless, it's definitely well within range right now, this North Node Neptune trine. And so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but essentially the way that I personally look at the North Node is talking about our life purpose, this sort of imaginary point in the sky, this mathematically calculated point based on the moon and the Earth's. Wow, I don't know my stuff. Something about the orbit of the moon where it crosses the orbit of the Earth. But geez, I should know this, but for some reason I don't. I apologize. I don't know everything. But basically, whatever. The point is that the North Node, from my studies and investigations, seems to indicate mostly a point that is talking about our life purpose. And so when a point that is talking about our life purpose trines or harmonizes Neptune, or harmonizes with Neptune, the planet of dreams, then this is saying that at a time like this, our life purpose is connecting in a very positive way to our dreams and imagination and creativity and things of this nature. Also, why did my air conditioner turn off when I'm still too warm? I guess I'll just turn it down, then it'll come back on soon enough. So, this could be a good time for, getting creative about our life purpose, everyone, everywhere. And dreaming, really dreaming a lot, following our dreams. Of course, my advice to everyone is to always follow your excitement, but now may especially be a good time for that. But anyway, like I said, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. Let's see what else we've got coming up. Let's just see. Here we go. Mercury, if I can get it displayed, enters Leo on June 26th at 8:22 p.m. Eastern Time. So I mentioned this in my recent astrology stream, but it's important to reiterate because the energy is definitely going to shift. at this time. When this happens on June 26th, 8:22 p.m., our thoughts are going to go from that, again, self-protective, deeply emotional, careful, cautious Cancerian energy to being much more bold and expressive and passionate and inspired and perhaps even interested in things like teaching or our legacy, fun, and perhaps love and romance a little bit as well. If we sort of look at the corresponding fifth house, which is, of course, the sign of Leo, Mercury entering the sign of Leo. So how do I simplify this? On June 26th and after June 26th, our thoughts are going to go from being all careful and cautious and concerned with emotions and stuff like that to being much more about fun and excitement and being bold and expressive and stuff like that. That's simplification of that. Let's see what else we have here. Also, I realized after my recent astrology stream, and I was so disappointed that I sort of made this mistake, but I forgot to talk about the full moon. Now, of course, we just had the full moon recently, so it's not much to say about it at this point, but it was indeed in Sagittarius, or I talked about it briefly in my last astrology stream, but I didn't get deep into it. But yes, it was in Sagittarius, right around the end of Sagittarius. And of course, at that time, all of our hopes, ideals, beliefs, imagination, stuff like that were powerfully activated. But again, it's over with now. Next will be the new moon. So let's just pull that up real quick while we're sort of on the subject. The new moon is on July 2nd in the sign of Cancer. So even more of this Cancerian, watery energy. So when we have a new moon, essentially that's like planting seeds in the fertile soil of whatever sign the new moon is in, essentially. So when it was in Gemini last month, that would be like seeds of intellect. Well, this month on July 2nd, technically next month from where we now are, but this new moon on July 2nd, you'll want to plant emotional seeds in whatever way that means to you, or whatever that means to you, essentially. Engage in some kind of ritual that shows the universe what you're trying to create or what you want or what's important to you or whatever, ideally on July 2nd. And if we want to zero in on the exact time of the new moon, actually, wait, I think this program might just tell me that if I just sort of look. Yes, here we go. July 2nd at 3:16 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. 3:16 p.m. 3:16 and 5 seconds if you really want to know. So there's different opinions on this. Some people will say that if you're interested in like doing rituals and stuff like that, that as long as you do them on the day of the full moon or the new moon, right around the new moon, then that's all that matters. But other people will say, no, if you're going to do a new moon ritual, you do it at precisely the time of the new moon. So that's 3:16 p.m. Eastern Time, July 2nd, for those who are interested. Hey there, Rosie. May you donate through PayPal? Yes, absolutely. Yes, I did raise my price a bit to $10, so I apologize for that. But for reasons that I came up with as I was doing some self-reflecting, I realized that that was something I needed to do for myself personally. But yes, absolutely. PayPal is actually better. If anyone's wondering, like for me, because then YouTube doesn't take a cut of my money or of the money that you donate. I actually get all of it. So I prefer PayPal, but I understand when people want to use Super Chat. And actually, that reminds me, I forgot to paste the donation link into the chat earlier, the PayPal donation link. So I'm just going to paste that in the chat right now. Okay, there we go. All right, so let me know when you've made that donation, and I'll verify it, and we'll get right to your question. In the meantime, indeed, as I was saying, July 2nd, 3:16 p.m. Eastern Time is the exact and precise time of the new moon. So plan your rituals accordingly for those of you who are into that. All right, so let's see. What else can we talk about? Oh, wait, you sent your payment? All right, I see that there. Thank you very much. Let me know what your question is whenever you're ready. My ex Anthony and I ever have a relationship together in the future? All right, let's take a look at this. So, we would like a Celtic Cross reading for Rosie on the question of, will her ex Anthony and her ever have a relationship together in the future? Will Rosie and Anthony ever have a relationship together in the future? Celtic Cross. Let's see what we get. Rosie and Anthony ever have a relationship together in the future? We are asking the universe for insights into this situation. Will Rosie and Anthony ever have a relationship together in the future? All right, that's it. Okay, King of Swords, Ace of Swords reversed, Eight of Swords, Two of Pentacles, Six of Swords, Ten of Wands reversed, Page of Pentacles, Strength, the Star, and the Five of Wands. All right, let's see here. Actually, I'm going to draw an 11th card to get some more information on the outcome. All right, Eight of Wands reversed. Okay. Making for a total of 3 eights. That 8th house lit up. 8th house of all or nothing energy, transformation or purification. Let's see here. Well, I think what the cards are essentially saying is not likely a romantic relationship. There may be some other kind of relationship, possibly, maybe being friends or something. But, we've got, for one thing, in the hope to achieve position, the Six of Swords essentially saying a need to move forward or a desire to move forward and move on from something in the past, perhaps in this case, in order for there to be anything new. We do have Strength as the outside force coming in, which is typically a very good sign, especially in a reading like this, because that's, well, we can maybe get into that later, but let's just say good sign for now. But then for the final outcome, we do have the Five of Wands, which talks about conflict. And sometimes it can be positive conflict, like competition and stuff like that. Other times more negative conflict, like arguing and fighting. And then for the 11th card I drew, again, the Eight of Wands reversed, which if this card was upright, I'd be saying, oh yeah, that's talking about love. That is talking about love and love happening fast, or at least a romantic relationship, of some kind. But when it's reversed, essentially that energy is blocked. And so maybe even, I almost want to say maybe even the potential is there, but there's still this blockage to it. But what's the other thing I was going to say? I can't quite recall. But essentially, he has options, and he and his GF just broke up. I see. Well, that could be that Five of Wands energy, perhaps. Different people, conflict, sort of a competition. And also, in the past, Two of Pentacles, perhaps in that context, talking about, two different options or more than one option, juggling options. In a bad situation with your friends with benefits. I see. Well, that probably explains those 3 eights showing up then. 8th house talks about sexual energy. Now you caught feelings. I see. Yeah, that can be quite challenging. Well, I think, again, especially then with the Six of Swords and the hope to achieve position, or what you're reaching for, your highest hope essentially in the situation is represented by this card, which is about moving forward from difficult times. Two of Pentacles is the past. Yes, exactly. Two of Pentacles showing up in the past. But just because it's the past doesn't mean it isn't still active in the present or even carrying into the future. It's sort of what the present circumstances are based upon. So could ever change. Well, let's see. Change in the sense of the two of you becoming connected. Well, I mean, nothing is set in stone. So I know what to do. Yeah. Well, let's see. In addition to the Six of Swords saying that your highest hope in the situation is to try to move forward from the past, and now that doesn't necessarily mean like let him go completely. It's just saying move forward from the past and whatever that means for you. Um, your challenge card, which is also always going to be important, is the Ace of Swords. Did come up reversed, but Ace of Swords advising mental clarity, advising thinking about things logically and clearly, trying to maybe detach from your emotions somewhat to see the situation in that sense. And that's emphasized even more by it crossing over the King of Swords, your very first card, which oftentimes when this card shows up, it's a sign of being like, hey, let's think about things in a very logical, rational manner. And it could even be like with this showing up reversed, which can often indicate to a lack of clear thinking. It could even be that the emotional intensity of the situation is actually clouding your judgment of it. So there are a number of things you can do in a situation like that when it comes to trying to gain mental clarity. One that comes to mind that's one of my personal favorites these days is actually journaling. Like, so writing about your feelings or the situation or whatever. That can be very helpful because that is a very mental activity, very much Ace of Swords, King of Swords kind of activity. Um, that could be helpful for gaining clarity in the situation. Was moving on, but you got sucked in again. Yes, I see. And the Six of Swords, like cards seem to tell you to keep trying to move on. Part of me says it will be all right. Another part of me says I'm missing. I'm looking at him as the one that got away. To start journaling. Yeah, I recommend journaling. I recommend it. Even if you can only do it like once a week or something, like if you're busy or whatever, I highly recommend it. Yeah, I think that would help you gain a lot of clarity in the situation, and it's definitely fitting in with what the cards seem to be advising here. Um, because I try not to give like general life advice when I'm giving a tarot reading because I try to keep those things separate and just let the tarot reading be about information. But that said, I will say that when you write about stuff, when you journal, and really sort of dive into a situation, a particular challenge, once you gain a strong like intellectual understanding of that situation, which is surprisingly easy to do when you write about it. Um, as they say, knowledge is power. That clarity that you gain from that will give you so much power over the situation and make it more and more obvious what to do. And it's also a great way to actually process those difficult or challenging emotions. You know, a lot of people use it for shadow work, in fact. Like you could have layers of emotions and you can work through each layer through journaling, like maybe one layer per journal entry. So these are all things I would recommend. So thank you. I'm going to start writing. Excellent. Well, you're welcome. Let's see. And I guess one piece of good news is that in your near future, you do have the Ten of Wands reversed, which often is an indicator of the release of a heavy burden. So there's a bit of a silver lining there, I suppose. Reflection. You mean like reflection? You mean like is journaling a good thing for reflection? Is that what you're asking? Yes, it absolutely is. In fact, I was doing that earlier tonight myself. It's good. I'm tired of this anxiety. I feel you there. I go to therapy once a week, mainly for anxiety. So I know what that's like. Yeah, journaling can help with that as well. At least it's helped with me. All right, that was the end of my green tea. It was surprising how accurate the cards were. I thank you. Like I said, I always do my best. Have a good night. Thank you for the reading. Well, thank you so much, Rosie. And I really hope that things work out well for you. You know, we all have challenges. You're not alone. Just know that. And again, thanks so much. And you have a good night as well. All right. So I guess now we'll look at some more astrology. Yeah, I'm so glad, by the way, that people are understanding so far of my having to raise the prices a little bit, like asking for $10 per reading. Because here's the thing, I'll actually explain this right now, as long as we're sort of in the midst of all this. I was thinking about it a lot earlier tonight, and I was not feeling okay. I was thinking there's something that just keeps bothering me about the live tarot readings I do. And I actually, speaking of journaling, I made a journal entry about this. And as I sort of dived into it, what I found was that basically I felt like I wasn't being compensated enough for like using my skills and abilities. And I began to feel it felt like I could not. I tweeted this earlier. I should be able to say this easily, but I could not like keep doing that and love myself at the same time. Like it felt self-hating, it felt self-devaluing. It felt like I couldn't keep doing it. I wasn't enjoying the idea of like doing like these fairly extensive readings. I mean, maybe they're not the most extensive readings in the world, but they're often fairly extensive. And because a lot of times payments are through super chat, and YouTube takes like literally they take like 40 to 50% out of every super chat donation. It's like a lot of times, someone will donate, say they donate $5, I'll maybe get like 250 or like 275 of that. And so I thought, I can't keep doing this unless I get paid more. I'd rather not do it at all unless I get paid like at least $10 per reading. Like it just did not feel right to me. And so I thought, well, I feel kind of bad having to do this, but it's either that or I don't do these readings anymore. So, or I would like almost never do them. So I thought, okay, guess $10 it is. Still a lot less than what a lot of readers will charge, at least from what I've heard. I don't know. I should look into that. But yeah, so that's what was behind that. So anyway, back to the current astrology. What else can we talk about? Of course, speaking of retrogrades, Neptune goes retrograde very soon, June 21st, 10:37 a.m. Eastern Time. So when we have an outer planet going retrograde like that, it's very subtle. It's not something that we're likely to feel directly. We may or may not feel it on the 21st. But because Neptune is an outer planet and it moves so slowly from Earth's perspective, whenever it goes retrograde or direct for that matter, it's something that we kind of feel like is going on in the background. And again, what is Neptune? For some reason, we've talked about this planet a lot during the stream, but again, I'll briefly sum up. It talks about our dreams, imagination, creativity, spirituality, non-physical experiences, illusions, delusions, confusion. It has its negative aspects. So all of those kinds of things are going to shift in a subtle way in the days, weeks, and perhaps even months to come. Again, we may or may not feel it directly on the 21st, the day that it happens, but we'll likely feel it in some capacity, in the weeks and months to follow that. So, and of course, if we wanted to, we could look up all kinds of more detailed information on that, but that's it, essentially. Let's see what else. I'm going over here so I can see the upcoming aspects better. Okay, so along with Mercury entering Leo, let's talk about Mars entering Leo. Mars enters Leo July 1st, 7:19 p.m., right behind Mercury, which will be at 3 degrees of Leo at that time. So again, Mars is what we fight for, what we're motivated about, how and where we assert ourselves, what makes us aggressive, what we take action on, things of this nature. And Mars enters Leo. Well, Mars is a fire planet. Leo is a fire sign. So Mars basically likes being in Leo. When Mars goes into Leo, it's like, oh, now we're really ready to push forward, in its natural fire element. I mean, it rules Aries and Scorpio, but Leo is still very compatible energy for Mars. So it's like, now it's really time to push forward. It's really time to assert ourselves in a very bold and perhaps even dramatic way, because Leos can be very rather showy and dramatic. So this will start affecting all of us July 1st. And let me think what else can maybe be said with that. Actually, I don't really know what else to say about that. That pretty much sums it up. Yeah, we'll be feeling much more of that Mars, natural Mars energy, I'd say, much more aggressive, ready to push forward into new things, new territory, and feeling less cautious about taking action as things were when Mars was in Cancer, or as we were when Mars was in Cancer. So we're going to go from being cautious to being much more bold and willing to really push forward into the new July 1st, 7:19 p.m. Eastern Time. All right, let's see. So I believe an interesting thing happens here. Speaking of Mars, let me see if I can find it. Yes, hang on. So, as Mercury is slowing down from Earth's perspective, preparing to go retrograde, Mars catches up with it right as it turns retrograde. And so this stuff, this energy that we just had over the past couple of days when Mercury aligned with Mars and Mercury was conjunct Mars, we're going to have again on/around July 7th, 8th, thereabouts. This energy of Let's push forward intellectually. Let's get aggressive intellectually. Let's get aggressive when it comes to our words and communication. And possibly there could be arguments and conflicts and stuff like that. It's going to repeat itself. Now, the interesting thing, though, you see, is it is not going to be opposite Saturn and Pluto this time. So, fortunately, what we see on July 7th and 8th is likely to be far less difficult to deal with than what we saw during the past day or two or three. But it may still be intense. But, it can also be very positive. Sometimes we need to say things very directly. Sometimes we need to sort of push forward and maybe risk crossing some lines in our words in order to sort of get somewhere or to say things that need to be said even. So, and on that note, this second Mercury Mars conjunction that takes place on about the 8th of July is in a harmonious trine to wounded healer Chiron, meaning that it is cooperating very well with that wounded healer energy. So, you know what I think? I think that in many people's lives around that time, we're going to say things that need to be said that help us heal, that help other people heal, that perhaps help other people heal to help us heal. Like, we're going to say things that may be uncomfortable for people to hear, but will ultimately be for the benefit of healing, or at least will have the benefit of emotional and psychological healing. So that's very good. In addition to that, on July 8th specifically, the moon will have moved into Libra by then. That sweet, loving, harmonious, easy energy of Libra. So that should take the edge off of things considerably that day. And the moon forms a harmonious sextile to that, or a supportive sextile, I really should say, to that Mercury-Mars conjunction. So essentially, our emotions, our mood that day, July 8th, will harmonize very well with our saying things that need to be said, or telling like it is, or pushing forward with our words, our thoughts, our communication, whatever it happens to be. So that's a very good thing. Now, the moon, just to be technical, will be opposite Chiron. So that's like saying our emotions will be in something of a conflict potentially with the aspect of ourselves that's about the healing of wounds. But there's more harmony here than disharmony. So overall, it should be easier to work with. Let's see here. Well, however, unless we throw Uranus into the mix, in which case the Mercury-Mars conjunction on July 8th. Let me just make sure of something real quick. See if I can sort of zero in on the exact time that it takes place. Roughly 6-ish in the evening. We don't need, I guess, an exact time, but like 6 or so in the evening of July 8th. Yes, this is when this Mercury-Mars conjunction takes place, when it perfects anyway. We'll be feeling it possibly for, a couple of days, 7th, 8th, 9th of July. But here's the thing. When this happens, it is this Mercury-Mars conjunction square to Uranus. Uranus the rebel, the iconoclast, the one who is fighting for freedom and fighting for individuality, and also full of all kinds of sudden, shocking, unexpected things, sudden revelations, all this stuff. So, oh boy, this could play out in a number of ways. There could be an internal conflict with our individuality or our desire for freedom. Like, we may feel, how do I even put this? We may feel, even as we're pushing forward with our thoughts and communication, that we're still somehow going against the part of ourselves that wants to be free around this time. that even as we're telling it like it is to help heal wounds, like we're still sort of maybe even forsaking the part of us that wants to rebel, that wants to be free, that wants to be an individual. So I would say the challenge when this happens is to try to incorporate that energy, try to honor the aspect of yourself that wants to be free, that wants to be an individual, that wants to fight for freedom. Now, interestingly enough, another way I can see this manifesting for some people, since we have Mercury and Uranus involved, is maybe some sudden, like, mental revelations or like mental insights that perhaps upset things to some degree or are challenging in some way, but nevertheless are sudden insights, sudden mental revelations, and stuff like that. And if we want to take things a step further here, this is actually a fairly complicated web the more I look into it. When this happens, Venus will have just sextiled Uranus. And let me see if I can sort of figure out specifically when that happens real quick. Yes, just earlier that day, like roughly 11:15-ish a.m. Eastern Time, July 8th, Venus will form a supportive sextile to Uranus. So all of a sudden, the things that we like are happening, or the things that we find delicious and enjoyable are happening even while all this other stuff is happening. Or we have a love for the unexpected, a love for freedom or rebellion, a love for the new. And perhaps that Mercury Mars also talking about the new in its own way. There could be a lot of stuff that we're trying to sort of push forward into the new. But see, oh boy, this is so twisted the more I look at it. Our minds, though, don't want to go there because Mercury has just turned retrograde. So our minds don't want to go there, but other parts of us may want to. Like July 8th and thereabouts, we might want the new, and we might want to even push forward into the new. But our minds are not ready for the new. At least most of us. Some people, it would seem Mercury retrograde has little to no, or like virtually no effect on somehow. Some people can just push right on through a Mercury retrograde and be just fine, be seemingly unfazed by it. And that's great that they can, but we can't all do that. I personally have had mixed results with it, though I think sometimes I personally can actually push through it. I'm lucky in that way, but I don't think I can do it all the time. But anyway, if you're one of the lucky ones who it seems like you're never affected by Mercury retrograde, excellent. Embrace this time then around July 8th. Push through to the new and the exciting and stuff like that. But for the rest of us, I would say proceed with caution. You may want to push through, but try not to push through too much, or especially maybe avoid pushing into the new when it comes to anything mental or intellectual around that time. But anyway, let's see what else is going on here. And because we might as well complicate matters further, while this is happening, just before this, in fact, Venus also squares Chiron, so the aspect of ourselves that's all about what we love and what we find sweet and delicious and what we enjoy in socializing, is in an internal conflict with the aspect of ourselves that is interested in the healing of wounds. So on one hand, we have what we find sweet and delicious and what we love. On the other hand, we have trying to heal ourselves or helping heal wounds in others, in ourselves, healing wounds in general. These are in an internal conflict. Find a way to reconcile them. So maybe do something around this time if you can that you enjoy and that also helps you heal wounds, whether in yourself or in others or both. I think that's the best way to do this stuff. Let's see what else. Very soon after this, the Sun will align with the North Node. And I'm currently trying to find out when specifically it does. Let's see. Okay. Wait, hang on. Right around midnight, July 9th. So like kind of July 9th into July 10th. The Sun will align with the North Node, putting a conscious focus, conscious emphasis on our individual life purpose. And so individually and collectively, our life purpose will be brought into view, very much so, on or about July 9th and or 10th. So be ready for that. Now, interestingly enough, when this happens, this conjunction of the Sun and the North Node is opposite Saturn. And so our awareness of our life purpose is brought into view, but in some way that's challenging the authority or the reality Saturn. Saturn is not giving its approval to whatever's being brought into view regarding our life purpose at this time. And so that could be a bit of a challenge, not a challenge that's insurmountable, of course, but sort of getting the approval of authority or finding a way to make it really work or getting it to jive with reality, to work with reality. That will be the challenge at that time. Let's see. I'm just going to check a couple things real quick. Give myself a little breather, I suppose. Yeah, we've got a lot of interesting things coming up astrologically. And I know for me personally, actually, if anyone's wondering, July is looking to be a particularly difficult month. So that should be fun. But I'm ready for it. So let's see, what else can we talk about regarding this stuff? Let's see. Oh, there is a solar eclipse on that new moon. July 2nd, 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time. There is a solar eclipse. And eclipses in astrology, these are times where it is said that anything can happen. That things can sort of break through from other dimensions or parallel realities, speaking basically metaphorically here, but where anything can happen. However, there's different theories I've heard about this. Some will say that the actual effects of an eclipse you may see up to 6 months prior or 6 months after the eclipse. Others will say that it's specifically 3 to 4 months after an eclipse that you'll see the effects. Others say, I'm pretty sure I've heard this, that it can be on the eclipse itself that you'll see things happen. But regardless, that's July 2nd at 3:22 p.m. Eastern Time, a new moon eclipse. So let's see what else. Let's try to find out, because it will be quite important for us, when Mercury moves back into Cancer. Let's just see here. Almost there. Okay. July 19th, Mercury will move back into Cancer in its retrograde. So, while there will be that period of time with Mercury and Leo, and our thoughts will be focused on the much more bold and expressive and showy things and fun and excitement, our thoughts will return for a time to that cautious, emotional, Cancerian energy. And again, that starts July 19th. Let me see how long it lasts. July 19th until August 11th. On August 11th, around sometime just before 4 p.m., Mercury will move back into Leo. So that's July 19th through August 11th. I guess now we're getting quite a bit into the future. Mercury will be back in Cancer. Our thoughts will be back to the careful, cautious things and whatnot like they are now. But then August 11th, Mercury moves back into Leo, just as in the nearer future, it moves into on June 26th. So June 26th, 8:22 p.m. Eastern Time through July 19th, Mercury will be in Leo. And then July 19th through August 11th, it's back in Cancer. All right, let's see what else we can go over. Well, since I've covered the astrology quite thoroughly by now, I would say, let's look up some additional information. I know we did this last time, but we'll look up stuff that we didn't look up last time about this upcoming Saturn-Pluto conjunction in January of 2020. Because like I said, this stuff is with us all year. This year is with us all year, but it culminates on January 11th of 2020. And believe me, that time individually and with the world at large is going to be intense. So let's look up additional information about that. This stuff only happens roughly every 30 some years or so when Saturn aligns with Pluto. So this is a big deal. This does not happen every day. Saturn-Pluto conjunction 2020. Let's see if we can find... Well, let's just see here. We'll say this is someone's blog, but I guess when it comes to astrology, there are no real certifications, or at least it's not a field where you can rely on certifications in the way that you can with other fields. So don't worry. As always, I will give you my opinion on what we read. All right, let me make sure this is working. All right, here we go. Future predictions when Saturn conjuncts Pluto in 2020. On January 12th, not January 11th, that I've seen, but I guess it might depend on your time zone. January 11th or 12th, 2020, Saturn will conjunct Pluto at 22 of Capricorn. Many astrologers are noting that a Saturn-Pluto conjunction at Capricorn could be transformative in the extreme, even potentially very destructive. Astrologer Maurice Fernandez, published in the December 2015 edition of the Mountain Astrologer, quote, "The Saturn-Pluto cycle occurs roughly every 33 to 38 years, varying according to Pluto's highly elliptical orbit. This meeting of forces represents, among other things, the redistribution of power in the world, or, in other words, which faction will make the decisions that affect the greater collective, whether this occurs in plain sight or behind the scenes. From a spiritual perspective, this cycle reflects a rite of passage determining who is most qualified to be the custodian of resources, and thus regulates who will be in a position of influence. In its purest form, this cycle is one of the highest tests of integrity and morality for those in authority, along with a test of capacity and resilience. Beyond the management of power, this cycle is also about the skill to increase power and the value of resources. Looking back at previous cycles, we can see that a Saturn-Pluto conjunction occurred in October 1914, around the outbreak of World War I. This global conflict certainly reshuffled power dynamics by dissolving the Russian monarchy, the Ottoman Empire, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which led to the redrawing of the national borders within Europe. Yeah, and as I've said before, the halfway point of this Saturn-Pluto conjunction that takes place every 30-some years is, of course, the Saturn-Pluto opposition. And the last time we had one of those was when 9/11 happened, basically. It was in September of 2001. So you can see how these mark very, very intense events, whether it's Saturn opposite Pluto or Saturn conjunct Pluto. Pull up, September 2001. Let's just see for myself here. And there they were. See something. Now, it is interesting, though, that the perfecting of that aspect did not take place until, let's see, it looks like right before September 2001. But that's what we often see with these outer planet aspects. It's often not even on the day of the perfecting of the aspect itself, because, like I said earlier, with Neptune, this is like slow-moving, subtle stuff. We often see it in the weeks and months to come after the perfecting of it, when it's the outer planets. But let me see if I can figure out precisely when it perfected. Or at least get it down to the day. Looks like it was in early August 2001. There it is, August 5th, 2001. And then just a little over a month later, of course, 9/11 happened. However, I think this might have been a multi-part cycle as a result of Saturn's retrograde. Let me just see here. Oh, yes, it was. Let me see. Yeah, I'm struggling to find an exact date right here real quick. Okay, here we go. Meaning that, in other words, because of the retrograde motion of Saturn, Saturn opposed Pluto again on November 2nd, 2001, and it opposed Pluto a third time that I'm about to find out right now, or here in a few seconds or so. So whenever we see a transit like this, at least the way that I've looked at it, as I've noticed this pattern for quite a long time now, is that it's not, how do I say this? It's not like the first time it happens is the only time that's important. It's not even like each of the 3 times it happens is the only times that's important. It's more like from around and about the first time it happens to around and about the third and final time it happens, all like the whole period of time between that and including those beginning and ending parts are important. Like that energy is active that entire time because, try to imagine on a chart, Pluto's up here, Saturn's down here, and it's sort of doing this pendulum motion. So it opposes Pluto once, and then it moves forward a bit more. It goes retrograde, opposes Pluto again, continues swinging back this way, goes direct, and opposes Pluto for a third and final time. That's how that works. And so what I'm saying is from the first time that it opposes it to the last time it opposes it in that 3-part series, that whole period of time is significant for this kind of energy, this Saturn-Pluto stuff. So let's just see if I can find third and final time just to be thorough here. I've almost got it. Looks like it was on or around May 26th of 2002 that finally that opposition took place. Of course, Pluto itself is retrograde by this point, so I don't think that they opposed one another again. But see, here's the deal with Pluto. Pluto's orbit is not exactly what I would call reliable. And other planets have this issue as well, where like, how do I even put this? Sometimes it's not just a 3-part thing. Sometimes it's like a 5-part thing where a particular aspect like that will perfect 5 times, not even just 3 times. Also, hey there, Eleni. Welcome to the stream. But anyway, yes, so that was Saturn opposite Pluto, active in 2001, late 2001 into 2002, and we all saw what happened at that time. All right, so are you interested in a tarot reading, Eleni? Let's see. Just gonna multitask here. Where were we on this article? Can't do $10. That's okay. I understand I had to raise my prices. I might need to save it next time. Okay. Well, thank you for understanding. Thanks for popping in as well. So let's see. 1921 through 1923, Saturn square Pluto. This is interesting as well. The emergence of fascism and totalitarianism in Europe, Mussolini, Stalin, Hitler, 1939 to 41. Saturn Pluto square occurred during World War II. Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 1947 saw the division between India and Pakistan and their establishment as individual. In the Middle East, Israel gained independence from the British in 1948, creating an incredibly complex power dynamic in the region. The following cycle of 1982 marked a time of economic recession in the world with the highest rate of unemployment in the US since the Great Depression. It also marked the escalation of the Cold War during the Reagan years, later leading to the collapse of the Soviet bloc. Soon after the conjunction in January 1983, the Kilauea, not quite sure how to say that, but Kilauea or whatever, volcano erupted in Hawaii. It has become the longest lasting volcanic eruption and is still flowing. gods. On January 12th, 2020, or January 11th, Saturn conjoins Pluto at 22 Capricorn for a single and dramatic pass. We can expect this cycle to have an exceptionally powerful effect from the year leading up to the conjunction and approximately 2 years following it. This cycle is bound to stimulate significant geopolitical dynamics that will affect the distribution of power in many structures on a global scale. Angular aspects between Saturn and Pluto are also known to reflect natural disasters, particularly seismic and volcanic activity. So just consider that. Angular aspects between Saturn and Pluto are also known to reflect natural disasters, particularly seismic and volcanic activity. Yeah. And you know what? You know what the deal is with that right now, too? We don't just have that encouraging such things. We have, in the past year or so, off and on because of the retrograde pattern, but now definitely there for the next 7 years or so, Uranus in Taurus. And believe me, a planet like Uranus, which is all about breaking things up and shaking things up, in a sign like Taurus, which is all about being grounded in stability and earthiness. Well, what happens when you break up the earth? Earthquakes, volcanoes, all this stuff. That kind of activity basically is so much more likely over the next 7 or so years to come, because we're still fairly early into this, 6 or 7 years, whatever the hell it is. I'd have to look it up. But the point is 6, 7 or so years to come. Volcanoes, earthquakes, storms, perhaps an increase in storm activity. I guess climate change is a controversial topic in the minds of some, but stuff involving that, I'm sure we'll see, wild weather. But it's interesting because we've got Uranus and Taurus encouraging that, and now we've got this Saturn-Pluto conjunction in Capricorn encouraging that. And to take this a step further, so I just read over some of the things that have happened historically when we had Saturn-Pluto conjunctions and other Saturn-Pluto aspects, particularly the difficult ones, the squares and oppositions as well. But the thing that's different this time, and I'm not even sure when the last time this was that happened, it was probably hundreds, maybe many hundreds of years ago at this point, but it's that this time is happening in Capricorn, the sign of government, the sign of career, the sign of big business, big corporations, big banks. And it's all about this idea of, sort of disrupting the power structure or redistribution of power and cleansing, purification, all this stuff. Imagine what that's going to mean for governments and corporations and banks and stuff like that all around the world in the next year or 2 or even 3 to come, in the years to come. I mean, January of 2020 is going to be intense as hell. Also, for anyone wondering, on that note, I bet this is going to bring up this idea in a number of people's minds regarding American politics and 2020, the idea of Trump and the idea of re-election. Well, I'll say I haven't looked at the astrology of it very closely myself, but I have watched a video by the excellent Maxine Taylor, a very, very incredible astrologer who's been doing this stuff for decades. And you can search for her here on YouTube, Maxine Taylor. You can search that on YouTube and search Trump re-election. She looked at the astrology of Trump getting re-elected. And I don't want to give everything away right here, right now, but I guess I'm about to give most of it or much of it away, or the big sort of revelation. Basically, the astrology indicates, unless there's some, highly unusual election development that would alter the time and or location, that certain key things regarding who gets elected take place, such as like votes being counted, like if there was like a recount or whatever, unless there's some anomaly like that, it looks highly unlikely that Trump will get reelected. So, and again, I'm not saying that to be political in the slightest. I don't care what your political views are, whether you love Trump or you hate him or you're indifferent or whatever. I'm just telling you literally what the astrology says, or what I recall from Maxine Taylor's video anyway, which I recall understanding and concurring with when I watched it. But in all honesty, I haven't watched it in forever. I haven't looked at that stuff since then, so I can't recall the details. But yeah, it's like, I'm not even trying to be political here or be like, I'm not trying to say anything about that. I'm just literally telling you objectively what the astrology says, and that it doesn't look good for Trump getting reelected. So there you go. So let's see here. I've been going for almost 2 hours now. It's getting really late, 3:41 a.m. I should probably shut this down soon, but let's just try to sort of wrap it up. All right, let's see. At worst, with Mars and Aries retrograding later in 2020 and squaring the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Ooh, this is interesting. Serious political conflicts and even a global war are possible. Hell of a way to wrap up this stream. We can expect rebellion on both the individual level, people leaving their workplace, reinventing themselves, and the collective level, worldwide protests demanding change. In light of growing separatist sentiment in the U.S., we may see the secession movement gaining greater momentum. Ye gods. It's interesting how the split between differing viewpoints of people is getting wider and wider and wider. It's very interesting to me. Astrologer Robert Hand, his influential books include Planets in Composite, Planets in Transit, Planets in Youth, said, quote, Pluto is about power, but not just any kind of power. It is the power of the transformations that result as things come into being and pass away. The planet Saturn is not usually considered a force for change. It is often seen as resisting change, as being conservative, stubborn, even reactionary. Seen as resisting change, yeah, indeed. Saturn's all about resistance, essentially. Saturn's the planet of resistance, in fact. I don't think you get any more resistant than Saturn. These are qualities of Saturn, to be sure, but that is not the complete story. Saturn has to do with our experience of what underlies all order and structure. The Saturn-Pluto combination represents crises that come about as the normal, lawful, and predictable manifestations of Saturn are challenged by the need for deep and fundamental changes in the system, which are indicated by Pluto. Saturn-Pluto change is likely to impose some kind of restriction on our freedom of movement or upon our resources. Interesting. So wait a minute. Saturn-Pluto combination represents crises that come about as the normal, lawful, and predictable manifestations of Saturn. As the normal, lawful, and predictable manifestations of Saturn are challenged by the need for deep and fundamental changes in the system, which are indicated by Pluto. Saturn-Pluto change is likely to impose some kind of restriction on our freedom of movement or upon our resources. Richard Tarnas, a professor of philosophy and depth psychology, in his important book Cosmos and Psyche, suggests that the Saturn-Pluto cycle, quote, coincides with especially challenging historical periods marked by a pervasive quality of intense contraction, eras of international crisis and conflict, empowerment of reactionary forces and totalitarian impulses, organized violence and oppression, all sometimes marked by lasting traumatic effects, end Whoa. And I know for me personally, it's happening in my fourth house of home and family and immediate environment. So I guess things are going to be changed, transformed, despite any amount of resistance like never before when it comes to my home life, my family life, my immediate environment life, especially around January 2020. So won't that be interesting? To which I say, sounds good to me. You know, I got some plants in April. Maybe I'll be getting more plants. Maybe that's what's going to happen. Something tells me it's going to be a hell of a lot more than that. All right, I think it's finally cooled off enough in here. Wow, 72 degrees. How am I so warm? I think streaming makes me warmer because I'm like talking and using energy or something. It's pretty twisted, but in a good way. No, maybe that's what Saturn Pluto will be about for me. My fourth house. Like, fast forward like 2 or 3 years from now, this room's just like fucking covered in plants, just like plants everywhere. You know, plants on the table, plants lining the walls, plants outside the room. I'm kidding. That would be crazy. That would probably create so much humidity that before I knew it, mold would be creeping in everywhere if I understand things correct, or if I am understanding such things correctly. And besides, getting enough artificial sunlight to those plants, because they definitely would not get enough, things as they are, be extremely difficult. Okay, wait, this is interesting. You guys probably don't find this interesting, but I do. I made it so much colder than usual in here, thanks to the air conditioner, that my computer fans, even while I'm live streaming, have literally been able to decrease in speed, making it quieter, for the moment at least. The air conditioner was literally cooling off my computer as well, which I know it does, but I know that has an effect, obviously, but damn, it's actually quiet while I'm streaming. This is unheard of. Anyway, where were we? He also notes they tend to be times of genocide. Back during the 410 to 412 conjunction, the Roman Empire experienced the most intense period of barbarian invasions. Rome was sacked in August 410 when the planets were exactly 2 degrees from alignment. The same 2 degrees from alignment happened on the 9/11 attack in the U.S. Yeah, holy shit. Wait, so actually here, I think this is what I'm going to do. Since I'm thinking of wrapping this stream up, but I don't want to wrap it up just yet, I'm actually going to make it unlisted. So theoretically, new people won't be able to come in after a bit because they won't be able to find the stream. And then we can just sort of wrap things up because, yeah, at this point it's getting really late and can only handle so much more. But again, I can't talk right now. But I guess then actually I will make it public though again after I'm done streaming, because we've talked about so much astrology during this that it's worth keeping on my channel. Like, this is going to be hopefully good stuff. I think it's good stuff. Hopefully other people do too. And by the way, since this is going to be public, I want to say again, just real quick, thank you guys for understanding. Thus far, at least, I haven't had anyone take any issue with it really or anything about my having to raise my prices. Like I said, I mean, I'm sure cynics may scoff at this and say that I'm lying and that I'm like being greedy or whatever, or there may be some cynics out there who would think this, but I guess you'll just have to take my word for it. Honestly, it's really not even about the money for me. It's about my own self-worth and like loving myself. It's about self-love. Or like, I guess you could say you could make the argument that it's only about money in so much as it's about my own self-love and self-worth, and like not devaluing myself. Because yeah, like I said, as I was reflecting deeply about it earlier tonight, I was like, I just do not feel right giving readings without getting paid more for them, basically. I just don't feel like I'm doing myself justice for that. And it was literally at the point where I wouldn't even have wanted to continue doing readings if I couldn't like charge $10 for them. So yeah, that's why I had to raise the price. So I'm sorry if that's disappointing, but that's what we have. Still a lot less than a lot of other readers from what I have heard and observed. So anyway, continuing with the astrology. So I'm going to reread that previous paragraph, though, because it's quite significant. It says, he also notes they tend to be times of genocide. Back during the 410 to 412 conjunction, the Roman Empire experienced the most intense period of barbarian invasions. Rome was sacked in August 410 when the planets were exactly 2 degrees from alignment. The same exact 2 degrees from alignment happened on the 9/11 attack on the US. Writing on the impact of the 1982 conjunction and a connection with the AIDS crisis, quote, an important characteristic set of Saturn-Pluto themes emerged in the collective psyche in the widespread rise in fundamentalist interpretations and moralistic judgments on the epidemic of God's righteous punishment of sin. End quote. This phenomenon, he says, closely resembled the emergence of widespread views in medieval Europe when the bubonic plague was seen as the result of God's wrath during the Saturn-Pluto conjunction of 1380 to 1340. And it was seen again during the conjunction when 9/11 2001 happened. I was just distracted by a tiny bug. And Christian fundamentalists said it was God's punishment for moral corruption. Just multitask a bit here. The positive potential of the Saturn-Pluto archetypal complex is usually inextricably intertwined with confronting its negative manifestations. Great courage in the face of darkness, danger, and death, sustained effort and determination, intense focus and discipline, moral discernment and wisdom born from experience and suffering. So I know that all this Saturn-Pluto stuff might sound a bit scary, might sound a bit like doom and gloom, but just remember, here's the thing with astrology, it reflects the nature of life itself. The planets always keep moving around and around and around. And you know what happens with these challenges? We get through them. We find a way to get through them. Like, this is nothing we haven't been through before. As a species, as a culture, it's nothing we haven't been through before. So yes, it may get crazy, but we'll get through it. That's the thing. That's what you've got to remember. In fact, if you really want me to get a little bit in your face, a little Mercury Mars conjunction on you, I would say if you are responding or reacting would be the better word to this information on the Saturn-Pluto conjunction with an attitude of fear, then you likely have some negative beliefs surrounding that you might want to get in touch with. You might want to ask yourself, why are you reacting with fear as opposed to looking at this as an exciting, interesting challenge or opportunity, even perhaps, if you can really get optimistic. But at the very least, why are you having a reaction of fear, especially when this stuff is inevitable? I'm telling you right now, Saturn, Pluto, they're going to align in January of 2020. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. Why are you reacting in an attitude of fear when the more positive way of seeing it is as an interesting challenge? So if you have that, I'd suggest getting in touch more with your belief systems. It will be greatly to your benefit. Remember, your beliefs form reality. So where were we? A note on orbs, intensity of influence. Tarnas employs a wide range from 15 to 20 degrees, while some astrologers suggest a tighter range of influence between planets of a few degrees. My personal opinion with orbs is no more than like 4 or 5 degrees do I consider something a conjunction. But I've read other things before. I read recently 8 degrees. I guess a number of astrologers consider it that. I don't know. I think even just 4 or 5 degrees apart is pushing it, but what do I know? Let's see here. Wait, what? All right, let's see. Astrologer Lewis Acker. The negative side of Saturn Pluto is about as bad as it gets, as it signifies planned, organized, and purposeful criminality, tyranny, and evil at the highest level. Wow. The Saturn-Pluto combination is associated with the worst abuse of power and corruption. This influence will reach its peak in 2020 when Saturn is actually conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. Conjunctions, squares, and oppositions of Saturn and Pluto generally coincide with very negative and disruptive occurrences, such as the beginning of World War II and 9/11. The Saturn-Pluto conjunction can bring about the demise of important economic, corporate, and political power structures and the downfall and disgrace of those who occupy positions of power in those institutions. Debt-burdened major corporations, governments, banks, and other economic institutions could come to a grinding halt, signifying the death of the old established political economic power structure. These power structures could become even more oppressive and tyrannical as they desperately try to remain in control. Yeah, that's a bit of a concern. And as I said before about Uranus and Taurus, from what I've heard in the past, an issue with Uranus moving into Taurus is that in reaction to the rebellion inherent in Uranus transit through Aries for the 7 or so years before it moves into Taurus, various governments around the world have sort of swung politically to the right and to more authoritarian type government. So we don't even just have the Saturn-Pluto conjunction making us concerned about that particular kind of challenge. We also now have Uranus in Taurus having come from Aries, where, people were rebellious as hell, basically, for 7 or so years. Anyway, how much longer is this? Not that much longer at all. Okay. Actually, I do need a tissue real quick, so I'm going to grab one so it doesn't keep distracting me, and then we'll finish this up, finish up this article, and then that'll be it for the night. All right, here we go. Jeez, I almost wasn't going to stream tonight. I didn't quite feel like it. Now I'm really glad that I did, because as soon as I sort of got going with it, the momentum carried me, and it felt really good and continues to feel really good even now at literally 4 a.m. All right, updated February 18th, 2019. I felt it was important to put the Pluto-Saturn conjunction of 2020 in context with another conjunction in 2020 of Jupiter and Saturn in Aquarius. Ooh, interesting. And think about that. All right, here we go. Cosmic Mind says a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction represents a fusion of tradition and innovation, the melding of antagonistic desires to maintain the status quo and yet to seek freedom from it simultaneously. I'll try to sit up a bit more, I guess. I'm wanting to get comfortable, but it doesn't look good on camera if I'm sitting way down, I guess. These are periods where traditional systems, methods, and approaches are forced into reformation. This conjunction is likely to correlate with economic and political policies emerging from previously alienated voices and minds, as well as the desire for liberation from the constraints of the past. While the 2020 period of Saturn-Pluto's conjunction will likely be constraining, Jupiter and Saturn's conjunction beyond it will help to offer up new solutions, which can lead to fresh approaches to managing the economic, social, and political challenges. Interesting. Previously alienated voices and minds was a desire for liberation from the constraints of the past. Huh. So it's almost like, so what they're saying is it's almost like this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that follows the Saturn-Pluto conjunction is almost like a saving grace, or something that helps us sort of almost recover from the difficulties, the challenges inherent in the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. Cosmic Mind says, as we look beyond the Saturn-Pluto conjunction and consider Saturn's conjunction with Jupiter, a new order will emerge from the outsiders. Many geniuses, rebels, and the marginalized are likely to gain power and help shape new structures, and incredible technological innovations will help to catalyze that. Wow. A new order will emerge from the outsiders. Many geniuses, rebels, and the marginalized are likely to gain power and help shape new structures, and incredible technological innovations help to catalyze that. Yes, and I would say even more so with that, what they're saying there, because remember, this Jupiter-Saturn conjunction is taking place in the sign of Aquarius, the sign of rebellion, of the intellect, of a scientific mind, of genius, of innovation, of a love for humanity, of grassroots movements, humanitarian stuff, all this kind of stuff. My air conditioner is back on. My fan speeds have increased somewhat. So there you go. But anyway, so yeah, that's, wow. That's going to be some interesting stuff, that's for damn sure. Geez, it's almost like if you were to sum all this stuff up, it's like there's going to be likely turmoil in government in 2020, 2021, maybe 2022 also. And then at the same time, at least in 2020, there's going to be like those who are sort of the rebels, those who are sort of on the other side of the power structure, the rebels, the grassroots types of people, those seeking freedom and individuality and all that, they're going to gain more power, possibly, from what we're seeing here. That would be like a theory of mine with this. So, wow, that is fascinating. So let's see. Adjust the temperature a little bit more. No need to make it quite as cold this time around. So yeah, that's it for that article. Wow. I don't know what else to say. Just, we've got some interesting times ahead of us. That's for damn sure. That is for damn sure. So, let's see if there's anything else I can cover here. Nope, not really. Just hope everyone has a nice start to summer, which officially begins when Cancer season begins, June 21st at 11:53 a.m. Eastern Time, as I said earlier. Make sure that you're getting outside and enjoying things, especially, if you're in like the Northern Hemisphere where it is literally summer and there's nice weather to be enjoyed. And that's something that I am making myself do a lot more these days because it's well worth it. Get out there, don't let anyone or anything stop you, and enjoy life, enjoy nature if you can. And remember that as interesting as it is to look at all of these astrological developments and energies and aspects and what is likely to happen, what may happen, what may not happen, both the things that we can look forward to and the things that are likely to be more challenging, all we ever have ultimately is the present moment. Life is always happening only right now. So it's really this journey from one present moment to the next through this astrological energy, this astrological data that we spend so much time studying and going over because it's so fascinating. It's really the journey, the moment to moment journey through it, that is what matters the most, and that will really end up being what affects you the most and what determines your level of happiness and satisfaction and fulfillment and value fulfillment, to pull a term from Seth right now. Seth, channeled by Jane Roberts. Value, fulfillment, happiness, satisfaction, all of these things. It's living much more in the moment, even as we have this sort of mental, intellectual, astrological awareness of what is happening energetically as we move from one moment to the next, as we move through this thing we call time, this illusion that we call time. And as if to emphasize the finality of it, my air conditioner clicks off. Thanks again for being here. Thank you to those who got tarot readings. And thank you for being understanding of my raising the price to $10 now. By the way, if anyone's wondering this also, my astrology readings that I offer to do, those I'm still keeping at $20. $20 I still feel perfectly comfortable with for astrology readings, birth chart readings. So remember, anytime you want any of those, anytime I'm doing live tarot readings, it's almost certain that I'm also willing to do astrology birth chart readings for $20, whether you donate through PayPal or Super Chat. So since I know I'm going to actually leave this as public, since I talked about the astrology most of the time, anyone who ends up watching to this point, if you're interested in that, remember you can, just pop right in. Feel free to pop in and ask for an astrology reading and donate $20 through PayPal or Super Chat. And I'll be happy I'll be more than happy to read your chart and dive into it with you and see what we can find out for you. And of course, with that, you'll also get a tarot reading if that's what you desire with your astrology reading for $20. So, yeah, that's about it. Thanks so much for watching. Enjoy yourselves. Enjoy indulging in astrological knowledge as I do. I highly recommend planetwatcher.com. Simple, easy way to keep track of the stars, like if you don't have your own astrology software or whatever. And have a great night. Bye for now.